What's up, boxing fans? Episode 16 of the Slip and Weave podcast, and the first time that I have videoed it. Let's get it. Yeah, this is a little weird. I still haven't quite worked out the background, how I'm shooting this. I haven't really worked out multitasking, the microphone, like the notes, all of that. This is very much a work in progress right now, but it's good to be with you in this capacity for the first time on video. I haven't done this in a long time. It's a little awkward almost to be talking to it. It's already weird to be talking to a microphone when you're by yourself, but then you add like the camera into the mix. It makes it a little weirder, but I'll get used to it, I guess. There's been a lot going on in the world of boxing this week, but before I start that, I had the experience yesterday of canceling my gym membership. I don't know if anyone canceled it prior to the virus or have since canceled it recently because, shit is starting to open back up and they don't feel comfortable going in and working out. But I've been really finding that I've been getting better workouts at home. Not that I'm in the business of handing out fitness advice, but I've definitely found with this this virus and this quarantine, just being home a lot, that you really don't need a lot of space to get a decent workout for the most part. I've been doing stuff in my garage. Some of it's boxing stuff, some of it's not. A lot of what I do is I'll just I'll stretch out. I'll take my hand wraps and I'll tie them, both ways across the room, and use those two ties as a way to move my head after throwing punches. So I'll do, maybe a half hour of shadow boxing. Sometime in April, I bought a Total Gym. I don't know if anybody uses a Total Gym that's listening, but it's basically just like a sliding platform that you can change the angle on, and you sit on it, and it has bands that you use, and it's all just your own body weight or a percentage of your own body weight that you're using on an incline platform or a decline platform, I guess, technically, depending on the exercise you're doing. So I've been doing that, stretching. I'll shoot some hoops sometimes, but I think it's really interesting just having just being at home a lot the way we are right now. At least I'm having this experience of kind of figuring out the shit that I need and the shit I don't need. I think one of the things that I don't need is the gym. I think that's what you need. The gym, I guess, if you are like a professional athlete and there's a specific kind of training that you need to do that's not conducive to being at home. But if you're just a regular person, you really do not need a lot of space. You don't necessarily have to have a total gym like I do. But just having like resistance bands and shit like that, it's really helpful. Anything that's using your own body weight, shadow boxing doesn't require a lot of space, and it's a nice cardio. So that's my 2 cents on indoor workouts, on my little fucking prison garage workouts that I've been doing. There's a bunch of fights this weekend, man. On Saturday, we're back to doing fights every Saturday. All the fights are on Saturday now. For the most part. I'm going to say watch. There's going to be way fucking more in the middle of the week this week. But the first one that I watched was a heavyweight named Daniel Dubois knocking out a guy named Ricardo Snyders in the second round. Dubois is part of this like new class of heavyweights that's really big and mobile and athletic and has a nice boxing IQ. He's one of those guys, and he's 15-0, 14 knockouts. The guy is definitely dangerous. He sits down on all of his shots, but he's pretty calculated about what he's throwing and where he's throwing it. You could see he's super aggressive, and apparently he's supposed to fight Joe Joyce next, so we'll see if that's a thing. I think he's definitely going to win that fight. I think Joyce, to be honest, is a little bit clumsy and has gotten a soft touch as far as his opposition for the most part. I mean, he's fought Jennings, a couple other guys, but I don't see how with his sort of awkward chin up in the air style, how, Dubois doesn't catch him slipping at some point and put him to sleep. I think this guy is very, very dangerous. I think you're going to see this guy in the mix, and I think that anybody that's at the top right now has their hands full with this guy. So definitely check out Daniel Dubois. This was, I guess, a Queensberry Promotions card that took place in the middle of the day, as a lot of these overseas UK, international fights do with the different time zones. There was 2 other cards also. We were back at the MGM bubble on ESPN. They had one of my favorite new young guys, this guy, Elvis Rodriguez. He knocked out a guy named Cody Wilson in the 3rd round. This guy Rodriguez, 9-0-1, 9 knockouts, and he's got Freddie Roach working with him. And Roach seems to be high on the kid, man. Roach seems like he feels like this guy is the real deal. And Freddie Roach is saying it. For the most part, I'm going to take his word for it, because he's trained some of the best guys in the world, and he's really high on this guy, and I am too. I would love to see him maybe start, bringing up his level of competition. I think the first couple of times I've seen him, it's against guys that he's so obviously better than that it is a little hard to gauge where he's at. But just based on what I've seen, the defensive reflexes and the skill level with this kid, like, all the pieces are there. He's got the right mentality where he's aggressive and he's on the front foot, but he's not reckless. He's not putting his chin out to get hit. But it'll be interesting to see, because I just think he's been so undermatched. Like, the guys I've seen him fight, they just have no chance. So I'm excited to see somebody in the junior welterweight neighborhood that they're going to put him in with to maybe make him think a little bit. It would be cool to maybe see him in with a guy like a Mauricio Herrera, or just somebody that's like, proficient, smart, a good savvy veteran with some good ring IQ that can just, maybe present a different look, or present him multiple looks, and we can kind of get a better idea of where he's at in his development, because I think that this guy has some serious potential in the next couple of years. Elvis Rodriguez, man, big fan. The fight after that was a guy named Arnold Barboza beating Tony Lewis. This was also a junior welterweight fight, which I was surprised by, because Barboza's a big fucking kid. That's what it looked like. He looked like he was about 5'10". He was broad, and he had some really nice skills. He had a really nice variety of punches that he throws. He mixes up where he's putting them. He slips shots to the body. His defensive reflexes and upper body movement is, really nice. I think the one area maybe he's lacking a little bit is punching power, but he doesn't look like a feather fist. And they were saying, this was the first time I'd seen him fight, but they were saying on the telecast that he had gotten knockouts in his last 3-4 fights or whatever. So I guess he's, learning how to sit down on his shots a little more, learning how to, not punch and already be on the move, but how to really sit down, let it go, let it rip and get around. And that way you're not sort of half throwing everything. Because I know a lot of times in the amateurs, that's how guys can develop, where it's more of a points-based system, and the whole idea is just touch, 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 and you're never, the whole name of the game is volume, as opposed to like putting somebody out. So I think that this guy is a sleeper, because he's not like an Elvis Rodriguez who's knocking everybody out. He's just a really smart, thinking man's fighter that's a tough little puzzle to solve. So maybe these two guys could fight each other. I don't know where they're both at in their development, but I think Barboza is probably ready to fight the division's elite. I don't think he needs any more development. He's 24-0, 10 knockouts. That's plenty of fights. He's got plenty of experience. The guy he was fighting was much better opposition than anybody that Rodriguez has fought. So obviously Barboza is a little farther down the line. So definitely check out both of those guys. This first couple of cards that they've put on since the lockdown, we've really gotten the opportunity to see some of these 4, 6, 8 round fights with these guys that are a little less experienced. They don't have as many fights, and we're seeing them in that developmental stage. Whereas before, with the exception of like the ESPN Friday night fights back in the day, you really didn't see a lot of prospects this early in their careers. So it's cool getting a look at the future, And then the main event of this one was Jose Ramirez winning a majority decision over Viktor Postol. Ramirez has 2 of the junior welterweight belts. This was a tricky fight, man, because I'm watching the first 5 rounds of the fight, and to me, it looks like Postol is just giving him a boxing lesson. And, he's jabbing, he's moving real nice, he's real light on his feet, he's making Ramirez miss a lot. And you can hear on the telecast Tim Bradley really giving him his props. And at the end of the 5th round, or maybe during the 6th round or something, Andre Ward reads his scorecard and he's got it 4-1 Ramirez. And I'm like, what the fuck is he watching? Is he watching this fight right now? And Tim Bradley said the same thing. He was like, Dre, are you kidding me, man? You don't think Postol is winning this fight right now? And so I kept watching the fight, and I was like, I could tell that me and him were really seeing like 2 different fights. Tim Bradley, we're seeing a way different fight than Andre Ward. So clearly there's 2 different ways to be seeing this fight. But I watched the rest of the fight, and I watched it twice, and I think both times I scored it 8-4 for Postol. I felt like, you look at the punch stats, yeah, it's a close fight. Every single round was a close, competitive round. But you have to look at, the entire narrative of the fight. Like what's going on. Obviously, clean, effective punching is the number one criteria. But who's following who? Who's doing what they want to do? Who's imposing their will on the fight? And ultimately, I felt like on a round-by-round basis that Ramirez was having to come and find Postol. It wasn't the other way around. And when I say having to come and find him, it wasn't like he was able to just muscle his way on the inside and land at will. That was not the case. There would be these minute and a half stretches where Ramirez would not land a single punch. And Postol would just be on the outside, popping his jab, being light on his feet, maybe mixing a little right hand here and there. But for me, Ramirez's offense was coming in these short bursts that they weren't hurting Postol with the exception of one time in the round, and there would just be these long stretches where it just seemed like Postol was allowed to stay on his bicycle, stay on his jab, not taking punishment, and effectively winning rounds. And that's obviously not what the judges saw. One had it 6-6, one had it 7-5 Ramirez, one had it 8-4 Ramirez. Andre Ward had it 7-5 Ramirez, and I'm looking at that scorecard, and it's like, if you're watching those first 5 rounds and you're not seeing what I'm seeing, that is probably how you're going to score it. And it's a complicated fight because I went to watch it the next day, and I was watching it with my pops, and he was kind of seeing the fight that Andre Ward was seeing. And he was feeling like, I don't feel like Postol's doing enough offensively and da-da-da. But I just wasn't seeing that. I felt like every time he would stick that long jab out, it would be popping Ramirez's head back, And, Ramirez would be swinging, missing for the most part. Maybe he'd get one here and there, but, it just seemed like he couldn't get anything going. And it wasn't just because of him. It was because Postol was effectively boxing. So these are things you have to look at when you're scoring a fight. You can't just look at who's on the front foot, who's moving away, trying to avoid the power puncher. It's like if you're on the back foot and you're just pounding the guy with jabs, pop, pop, all of that counts, man. All of that shit counts. There's no punches that don't count. So, unless they're not landing and they're getting blocked. It just seemed like Ramirez didn't quite figure out the puzzle, even though he was kind of bigger and stronger, and when he landed, it had a lot more impact. But it seemed like he couldn't figure out the puzzle, and Postol ultimately kept finding a way to do what he wanted to do. And that was the fight that I saw. So, I hate decisions like this in boxing because there's so many bad ones that it's easy to get frustrated. Obviously, this is a close competitive fight, so it's a little bit different. I can't be saying robbery like on some fucking Paul Williams, Lara shit, but it's frustrating to see a fight that way, and somebody else on the telecast is seeing the fight that way, and the other guy gets it. These guys take losses, and it's not like football or basketball where you're back in 3 days later and you can redeem yourself. These guys lose, particularly like this in a title shot. Like, these are once in a lifetime opportunities, and these judges have one chance to get it right on their behalf and to award the decision correctly. Which kind of segues me into another story that I found. Every week when I go to do this podcast, I'll just roll through boxrec.com, which is just a boxing statistics site, and they'll give you a rundown of all of the fights internationally, the results, what round, the venue, just all the information on the fight, the whole card. And I was looking down, and there was a fight card in Germany with some big names on it, but to be honest with you, nobody that I would talk. There was fighters on there I would talk about, but they weren't fighting compelling competition, so the matchups weren't interesting. But I was rolling down, who fought, and there was a fight that had gone the full 6 rounds, and it said no contest, and it was a guy named Rafal Jaku. I believe his name was Rafal Jakiewicz. I could be full of shit though. Rafal Jakiewicz. I'm gonna just call him Rafal. Against a guy named Rico Muller. Now, Jakiewicz, I believe, has been like a prominent journeyman in the welterweight division for years, and I think he's fought like a bunch of guys. I was reading down his box rec. I think he beat Delvin Rodriguez at one point. He's got a journeyman's record, but he's 51-26-2, kind of a high level jobber. Muller 25-3-1, but underneath the no contest it said decision, initially read for Rafal, and there was some sort of managerial protest, and that was under not investigation, but it was, there was some sort of result being approved. I've never seen that before in my entire life, where, a fight result is read, and, one side can see the scorecards is so bad and have that reviewed. So I was like, where is this even possible? So, of course, I started Googling this, and I could not find any information about this. Every American publication was talking about how it was a unanimous decision win for Rafal Jakiewicz, and that, this was a huge upset because I think, Muller was in line for some sort of title shot or mandatory or whatever. So I kept digging, and I just searched the fight, both fighters, Jakiewicz versus Muller, and I just put no contest at the end, and there was this German article that popped up, and of course it's all in German. So just out of curiosity, I fucking copied and pasted this shit into Google Translate, and it basically said that Muller's manager had protested the decision with what was called the BDB. And when I looked up the BDB, it's called the Bund Deutscher Berufsboxer. It's essentially the overarching boxing authority in Germany. They decide who the German national champion is in professional boxing. They are the boxing authority of Germany, the professional boxing authority of Germany. And essentially, Muller's manager, this guy Charlie Podell, had protested the decision with the BDB, basically saying everyone at ringside thought my guy won. I thought my guy won. We were all shocked. I think the only one that wasn't shocked was Jakiewicz. He probably felt like he won. But so apparently it was very obvious that this was a bad decision, that this was a poorly scored fight. So his manager protests the decision with the BDB. The BDB then has 5 judges watch the fight after the fight and judge it. And all 5 guys scored it for Muller, for the loser. So the fight was declared a no contest because the decision was bad. It was reviewed by separate judges. They all saw the other guy, so they negate the result of the fight. It doesn't become a win for Muller, but it's no longer a loss for Muller. It doesn't become a loss for Djokovic because he was announced the winner, but it's no longer a win for him. It's essentially null and void. And it was interesting because I've never heard of this. And for years, bad judging in boxing has been my biggest fucking pet peeve with boxing. It's like, how can new fans get involved and enjoy this and take this seriously when they watch a classic 12-round fight where one guy clearly wins and one guy clearly loses, and the decision goes to the guy that clearly lost? It's like, that's how we lose fans. Always. We always lose fans with the bullshit. So I think that each country or each jurisdiction, whether that's the individual state or whatever, but that each territory should have this similar overarching boxing authority that can take in the protest of a decision and make the decision to have it reviewed if it seems shaky. And I think that's a great way to keep justice in the sport, and it keeps judges accountable, because these guys get ripped off all the fucking time. It happens all the time. Even just since the end of the lockdown, there's been 4 or 5 bad decisions. This Postol fight, in my opinion, being the latest one. So I think this is something that boxing as a whole needs to look at. They need to look to this fight, this instance, as an example. There are ways to right these wrongs. There are ways, because not all judges are bad at the job. A lot, most fights are judged well for the most part. More than half are judged well. But there's so many that fucking aren't, man. And we got to get that right. And I think having something like this, somewhere to report these situations to have a non-biased panel of judges take a look at the fight, I think that's crucial for the sport to move forward and to develop. I think this is very, very forward thinking on the part of the Germans. So that's my take on that. The last card I want to talk about was the main event with Erislandy Lara coming back, fighting a guy named Greg Vendetti. But before that, a guy named Vladimir Hernandez won a unanimous decision over one of my favorite veterans to watch, Alfredo Angulo, El Perro. The dude is he's an OG of the sport at this point. And, this was a classic Angulo fight. He's a slow starter. He doesn't get going to the 5th, 6th round, and then he comes on, and by the time the fight ends, he's really moving downhill and he's landing hard punches. These days, the truth is the guy is fucking slow as shit, but his timing is still really good and his power is still really good and his technique is still really good. So he has those 3 things going for him, but you'd have to think that 5, 6, 7 years ago, this would have been easy work for Angulo, easy work. And this went a hard 10 rounds. Hernandez is a competent fighter for sure. And the 3 cards were announced 98-92 for Hernandez, and they give it to Hernandez. I scored the fight 5-5. I scored the fight a draw, and this is exactly the shit that I was just talking about where, Angulo's 38, 39 years old. He's been in the sport for 2 decades. Why are we ripping this guy off now? When he's at the end of his career, where he's trying to maximize the opportunities he can get from whatever he's got left in the tank, which frankly isn't that much. And it's infuriating that a fight that close, where every round is close and competitive, that they would have it 8-2 the other way. And, obviously this doesn't dictate everything, but the punch stats were very much in favor of Angulo as far as activity percentage, punch landed. He won all of those categories, if I'm not mistaken. So you hate seeing bad decisions, and you especially hate seeing bad decisions when it's older fighters that are kind of wrapping it up. I don't know where he goes from here. It might be time to call it, man. He's had such a fun career, and he's been entertaining us all for years. And, I hope that he's able to talk and to enjoy his family and to do all those things. And whatever he decides to do, it's been a lot of fun watching him, and I'm sorry he had to go out like this. But big shout out to Alfredo Pero Angulo. Seeing his former opponent in the main event, Erislandy Lara. These guys are two fighters of the same era and of a similar age. And Lara looks fresh as ever. He looks as good as ever, man. I've read some things here and there about the performance, but you look at the lack of activity, you look at the quarantine, you look at maybe not having access to the gym for a bit. This guy looked like $1 million to me. I thought he won every round clean. I don't remember this guy really landing any clean shot to the face or head for 12 rounds. He landed some nice little body shots here and there, but it was really a very one-sided fight. I don't know that much about Vendetti, but what I know about Lara is he's fought the very best of his era, and he's never been dominated, and for the most part, he's won. And he's had a hard time with judges, I think, because his style generally can be a little bit more defensive. He's very much a minimalist. He's on the back foot. He's taking openings as you give them to him. He's not really creating them. The jab is sort of a facade to set up the left hand. He's always putting power on the left hand. And it's a very tricky style to deal with because he's so mobile and his feet are so good. But there's always been this conflict in boxing media and with the fans and whatnot about, defensive boxing and its place in the sport. And is that a good thing? Somebody like Mayweather achieved the highest level of success with a very defensive style. Somebody like Bernard Hopkins also did the same thing. And I know those guys got, a certain level of criticism for that. But I read something on ESPN. I'm going to just read this out loud real quick. They've been doing like a review of this week in fights, like, is this person ready for this? And they ask questions, and then the journalist will answer it. The question that was framed in the article was, Erislandy is very good as a fighter, but is he good for boxing? Can he get the big fights with his defensive style? This is a 37-year-old fighter who's been around for 15 years. Lara had no problems with Greg Vendetti in a relatively easy win. However, the way Lara won is a little concerning. Lara landed 13.4 punches per round, according to CompuBox data. A fighter of Lara's pedigree should be able to win more commanding fashion against Vendetti, who tried his best to push Lara but was unable to crack the defense. Because Lara is in the PBC and manager Al Heyman has several 154-pounders at his disposal, Lara will get a notable opponent. But for Lara to be a compelling draw, he needs to be more active in the ring. Now, to be fair, Lara was engaging in the loss to Jarrett Hurd, a fight that turned on a 12th round knockdown that proved to be the difference. However, the lack of excitement has been a knock against Lara throughout his career. While winning is great, prize fighting should be entertaining, and on Saturday, Lara wasn't that. So it comes back to, what are you looking for? Are you looking for a barroom brawl? Or are you looking for hit and don't get hit? Because boxing is hit and don't get hit. And whatever means you take to achieve that should be treated with equal respect, because none of it's easy. It's all painful. We don't know what the fuck his body's going through the next day. Any fighter. So the criticism of this style, it's only done when it's convenient, right? If he was fucking big mouth, talking a bunch of smack, if he was out here calling guys names and shoving them at the weigh-in and acting all crazy and trying to be a tough guy, they would be selling the shit out of this defensive style, and they wouldn't be talking about this defensive style, and they would be talking about what a brawl it's going to. Every time Floyd would fight, he would be like, we're going toe to toe. And then he would do what he always does. He would roll on the outside. He would slip a couple right hands in. He'd tie him up, walk him to the center of the ring, and we rinse and repeat for 12 rounds. And nobody had a problem with it because he would do a bunch of yapping. But this guy comes in, and he's one of the most effective guys in the whole sport in his whole era. And this deep into his career, you want to fucking talk about how he's not entertaining? Like, these guys give their lives. These guys commit their lives. They sacrifice their bodies. It's hit and don't get hit. If you don't like hit and don't get hit, you don't like boxing. It's really that simple. You can have respect for Arturo Gatti and still enjoy Floyd Mayweather and still enjoy Bernard Hopkins, still enjoy Erislandy Lara. This is one of the great fighters of the era. Like, this is one of the most underappreciated fighters of his era, and he's still getting questioned. And frankly, whoever they put him in with next, I'm picking him. For the most part, I don't see anybody being able to match wits in a chess match with this guy. He's one of the very best pure technical boxers of the era. So, I wouldn't, if everyone's out there reading this kind of shit about Lara or about defensive boxing as a whole, it's just not accurate. It's an opinion. It's just an opinion. Every style commands equal respect. And if you can achieve hit and don't get hit by being a minimalist and by exposing yourself to as little punishment as possible, then respect. That's an extremely challenging thing to do. If your style is to just be in the pocket and to outwill somebody, that also gets respect, because that's a fucking rough way to go. So I think we should just be careful how we create style preference, and I think also it's harder with foreign fighters. They talk about, I was talking about this last week with Sergio Martinez, they always want to call non-American fighters not marketable, and it's because they can't talk shit, and that's what people here want. They want a big fucking loudmouth, and a lot of these guys are just humble athletes, man, and we should learn to appreciate them a little more. So that's it for this week, you guys. Thanks for tuning in to episode 16 of the Slip and Weave podcast. First time I'm videoing it, and hopefully I'll be back next week with a little more coordination, a little bit of a better look. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in. Peace, guys.